Hello, good evening. Welcome to Upfront. My guest today is a former power minister. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is also in Ghana's parliament even today. Our conversation will center around that big question. Is Ghana back to the dreaded days of Dumsor or not? We'll answer the question after this break. Welcome back. This is Upfront. Tonight, we are asking a simple question. Is Ghana back to the dreaded days of Dumsor or not? This question is actually dividing Ghana's parliament and forcing the energy minister to storm the house and seek, among other things, to set the record straight. How successful was he in that particular process? But this is the current energy minister. I'm sure you know that there's been ministers before him. I'm bringing you back to the man whose appreciation of that sector is very much known to many, a former power minister. Indeed, during his tenure, and I'm sure getting to the end of 2016, this phenomenon was said to have ended. But it looks like, to many, we're back to the dark days. Is it true? What's being done? What can be done to fix the problem permanently? Those are the questions that Dr. Kwabena Donkor will answer for us today. Honorable, welcome to Upfront.
Thank you.
I hope you are doing well.
I'm surviving by grace.
Where you live, are you having intermittent disruptions in the power supply?
Yes, I've had my fair share of intermittent disruption.
Is there Dumsor where you are?
Well, I have never been comfortable with the term Dumsor. Remember, Dumsor has never been properly defined as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
If you're talking of load shedding, I'll say yes.
There's been load shedding where you are?
There's been some load shedding.
So currently you are in load shedding?
Some load shedding, no. Today I don't think I'm in load shedding.
Yes, but I mean, what happened in the last few days? What happened in the last few weeks? What happened that got many Ghanaians worried about whether we are returning to Dumsor? Is it really load shedding, or, as government puts it, intermittent outages?
Well, let's make a distinction. There are two types of outages.
Yeah.
There are outages arising out of generation inadequacy, and that is what we generally call load shedding.
Okay.
And you see, the ministry has not communicated well. On one hand, we were told they had gas supply bottlenecks in the Abuaze corridor, and therefore the generating assets there could not hit peak capacity. Then on the other hand, we are also being told there's been some challenges with gas supply from Nigeria, and therefore also affecting the Eastern Corridor. If this is the case, then the ministry is indirectly telling us that we are not generating enough, arising out of fuel challenges. If you are not generating enough, then of course you have to ration.
Okay.
And if you ration, then you are load shedding. And I want to distinguish that from what I call localized outages, arising out of more out of operational reasons than anything else. For example, your locality is served by a transformer or even a substation. If there's a problem with that substation or your local transformer, and for that matter there is an outage, it is limited to the locality served either by that substation or by the transformer. And that is what I call localized outages. The number of transformers that will cut automatically if they are overloaded rather than blowing up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they would automatically go down?
Go down rather than blowing out.
And this will not be out of some generation problem?
No, it will not be. And those were the situations I had described earlier on as localized outages.
It is instructive because when you were a power minister, a similar conversation, and some people felt it was even mere semantics, a similar conversation on whether or not there's a difference between load shedding and also what now has become intermittent outages. In fact, you say that it's localized, what do you call it, outages.
Yes.
Does it matter?
It does. It does because the causes are different.
Okay.
If you don't have lights because we are not generating enough, that is far more fundamental than not having light because your transformer is blown or it's been overloaded and so automatically switched off.
Okay, so when you say fundamental, you basically are saying that will last longer than you having a local problem?
Yes, ordinarily, yes.
Okay, so I mean, that means that, for example, you can have an hour or two or even 3 or 4.
Even a day, for example, the underground cable serving your area can develop a fault. And it may take a day to locate and replace that underground cable. But it is limited to your area.
Okay.
It is not a nationwide phenomenon. Also, so the experience is more on a micro scale.
I get you.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about the scale of the problem that makes it either what they call it, Dumsor, and the cause. So 2 things can be identified in this case. 1, what caused it? Or on the other side, the scale of the problem. So what caused it and the scale are the main defining factors for whether or not it is load shedding or it is localized outage.
Yes.
Or as we call it, intermittent outage.
Or even the cause.
The cause of it.
Yeah, for example, amongst the communications that the ministry brought out, at one point they said there was a shortfall of about between 50 to 300 megawatts. Yes.
They also made the point that when the incident happened first, the combined effect of the Ameri, the Sonan Asogli, and all of the other problems was almost 800 megawatts.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what,
Yeah, so if you say there was a shortfall of even 300 megawatts, for example, let me give you the whole of the NETCO area, which is made up of Northern Region, Upper East, Upper West, about 90% of Bron and Hafo, about 5% of Ashanti. In fact, it's about 67% of the landmass of Ghana is covered by the NETCO area. They ordinarily consume less than 300 megawatts.
Oh, seriously?
Yes.
That's less than if you combine for both Achimota and Malam.
That's less than Tema.
Okay. Oh,
Tema alone. Yes, Tema alone ordinarily consumes more power than the NETCO area, which is about 63% of the landmass.
Okay.
And so, if you remember, in 2015, some people claimed we were not shedding too much light in the north. Of course, they attributed all sorts of reasons.
Yes, they say you were deliberately keeping some...
Precisely.
For political reasons, actually.
Precisely.
And you're making others who have not been voting for you consistently suffer.
Precisely.
That was the argument, really.
But that it was not for any reason other than if you share the whole of the NETCO areas, you only save 300. Tema alone, on a good day with the factories running, will do more than that.
I'll take a break and come back to you. This is still upfront. My guest is Dr. Kwabena Donkor. Not long ago, he was the power minister in Ghana's Republic. He's dealt with Dumsor before, I'm sure. He made, even before that, he made a very comment. I was there, was it Alisa Hotel or so, about mentally retarding feeding of the Dumsor situation. I don't know if he still would want to make similar comments today, but let's take a break and come back to it. You welcome back to Upfront. My name is Raymond Darko. As I did tell you, my guest today is, to be clear, that statement ought to be put right. Perhaps the only former power minister we have in this country today, right? Yes, the very person of Dr. Kwabena Donkor. Our conversation is on whether or not currently we have Dumsor, we are in low shedding period, and Dumsor, the dreaded Dumsor, is back and active in our country today. Earlier, the Minister for Energy stormed Parliament to go and correct something he thought was mischievously being put by a member on the minority side, Dela Soa. She brought Bobo and also some firewood to come and say that this is where we are today. But the minister has not taken any of those. We're seeking to get a man who's been in the office before, who understands what the two mean and what the differences really is supposed to be, and appreciate the circumstance surrounding and what really we can call Dumsor or not. Also because, if you know Dr. Kwabena Donkor, he fought those two expressions for a very long time. I remember his civil society engagements and all of that. That expression is also dear to him. So, back to square one. The question I was asking you was to find out from you, and you were explaining how the two differ and how historically even you in office had to deal with this particular problem. Now, the question I asked was simple: does it matter? whether we call it Dumsor or intermittent outages, or in your case, localized outages. But you sought to explain to me that because the causes matter and the duration of it is somehow related to the causes, it is important that it's properly characterized in this case. Yeah. Now, I want us to break this down to everybody's understanding so they can cut through the usual spin and get to the main issues now. I will read to you what the minister has stated as the main problem as we speak today. Now, in the press conference, he said there's been a coincidence of events in the power supply in the last few days, which is attributable to the following. One, apart from the tripping of Jubilee, which occurred on the 18th and 20th of November 2018, and OCTP, which occurred on the 20th and the earlier hours of 21st November 2018, which were addressed, said these issues were addressed. We had fuel supply challenges for generation in the east. Again, it says Nigeria gas stopped flowing due to the low pressure in the line to Itoki. I'm giving to understand this at town in Nigeria. On 22nd November 2018, then he added that the vessel which was delivering fuel, HFO, to the car power ship was inadvertently delayed. I mean, this is part of the Nigerian problem. Nigeria gas has been reliable for over the past 1 year. That's what he's saying. Rising to 80, the pressure of it was around 80 at that time. But it came down. He proceeds to say that the combined effect of all of these problems made sure that we had some 800 megawatts of available generation was compromised. So this includes 450 from car power and 400 from Asogli. The minister believes that this is what caused the outages. Again, he insists that this is purely intermittent and not load shedding plan kind of outages. Are his reasoning in this case, what he's suggesting to us, can it be true? Is it true? Does it conclude intermittent power supply difficulties, or it's Dumsor stroke load shedding?
Well, like I said, nobody has really defined Dumsor to me, so
load shedding. I will stick with your own load shedding. Yeah.
So, yes, if he says at a point we lost about 800 megawatts,
yeah,
then definitely we'll have to ration power.
Okay.
Because on a good day, we're doing between 2,000 and 2,400 on a good day.
Okay.
And so if you lose 800 out of this, you have to ration power. And load shedding is basically power rationing.
Okay.
Yes. His reasons, I believe they are factual. But this will not be the first time the FPSOs trip. If you remember, in 2016, January, February 2016, FPSO Kwame Nkrumah was taken out in order to carry out some works on the FPSO, on the turret and other things. So at that time, no gas was flowing. But depending on the contingency measures in place, you can ride this shortfall of gas.
Okay.
Yes. You see, it is
that means that one, there should be contingency measures in place in the first place.
And two, you see, we had also taken some steps. For example, one of the measures to ensure generation security or fuel security is to diversify your fuel sources. And so we have our usual reliable hydro, except when there's a drought. We have crude or light crude fired plants. Indeed, Sono Asogli Phase 2 fires light crude as well as gas. TAPCO fires light crude as well as gas.
Okay.
TICO, SEM Power, TT1P, they all can fire light crude as well as gas.
Yeah.
So, and then there is the heavy fuel oil plants, such as car power and the AXA plant. So today we have 4 fuel sources. The combination of this is that it ensures supply security, supply of power security, in that if one fuel source becomes compromised, to use his word, there are other fuel sources to take up.
Okay.
But the challenge was that we didn't have adequate crude oil.
Oh, okay, I get that. Because I remember during your time, there was this long talk about doing combined cycle,
Yes.
making sure that I can use fuel, it can use gas too, on some of these plants.
Yeah, some of the plants are dual fuel.
Okay. So what you're saying is that when gas was compromised, we didn't have replacement of fuel.
Of crude oil. You see, if you take the Abuazi corridor, the two major ones are TICO and TAPCO, as well as Ameri. Ameri is gas only for now. So if gas is compromised, Ameri cannot be fired. But TICO has a 330 megawatt capacity.
Okay.
TAPCO has a 330. So the two plants in the Eastern Corridor alone, fired on crude oil, can generate about 600 in the Eastern Corridor. And then you move to the Western Corridor. Sorry, the two plants are in the Western Corridor. TAPCO, TICO, Ameri. They are in the Western Corridor, the Abuazi Corridor. Then you move to the Tema Corridor, the Eastern Corridor. Sono Asogli Phase 2 can fire more than 200 megawatts on crude. Same power, 110, can do the same on crude, and TT1PP can also do another 110 on crude. Then AXA can do more than 300 on heavy fuel oil. Then Cal Power can do up to 400, 450 on heavy fuel oil. And so if gas goes off in the Abuazi corridor, then in the same corridor, if we had crude, light crude oil, we just switch over from gas to light crude. We'll only lose Ameri's generation capacity there.
Okay.
In the Eastern Corridor, we'll only lose Sono Asogli Phase 1, which is gas only. Phase 2, A and B, uses crude. Did we have crude? Enough crude to fire the plants? We didn't. And then, of course, we have hydro. In the past, in such emergencies, you ramp up. If you take Bui Power Authority, for example, the Bui Dam is a peaking plant in that you bring it on stream during our peak demand period, which is normally from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or take it to 11. But in the past, we have also used Bui Power as strategic reserve. Oh, okay. If there was a challenge, we got Bui working 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours. And so Bui plays this role. Indeed, if you look at the performance of Bui Power last year, Bui Power only generated about 60% of its capacity because there was no demand. But it is a very critical strategic reserve, because then you can bring it off peak as well.
I see.
Then, of course, there's Akosombo. You can ramp up Akosombo. And by ramping up Akosombo, you can also ramp up Pon, since Pon uses the water coming downstream from Akosombo. There are those issues. Why didn't we have enough heavy fuel oil in stock?
Because we understand, and according to the minister, and he even mentioned first the LCO, he says LCO is expensive.
Of course.
We didn't have money at that time.
So that is the fundamental issue.
I asked you the cost.
The fundamental issue is finance. Indeed, my former boss, Dr. Joe Otinyaje, former Minister for Energy, I was then a deputy minister under him.
Yeah.
At that time, we didn't have an energy problem. We had a finance problem. Okay. Finance is at the heart of this challenge. If we had enough financial...
So all the things I listed to you said were through?
I mean, the minister has more information in terms of the actuality than I have, and have no reason to doubt the honorable minister that we had inadequate generation.
Okay.
That's
the crux of the entire conversation.
Yes. Okay. And the inadequate generation from gas sources. We could have supplemented, or we could have even replaced the gas generation with light crude as fuel if we had enough light crude. We could also have replaced part of the gas with heavy fuel oil if we had heavy fuel oil. Remember, he says the vessel, there was a problem with the vessel.
That's it. It's delayed.
Basically, we didn't have heavy fuel oil in place. And we didn't have enough. Yes, for not just car power, for AXA.
Oh, AXA too.
Yes, AXA uses heavy fuel oil. And AXA can give us 340 megawatts.
I see. Okay, so then the concern about, and government has rejected this claim about being a money issue, because they say that they don't owe these institutions. And indeed, even if there's any kind of financial arrangement, it's not like it is an arrangement that became fresh this time around. The debt they complain about in the sector, they say, has been long-standing. It's a legacy debt. It's a debt that they came to see in office. In fact, the VRA boss made particular reference to that since this government came in, they be very, very much consistent with clearing of his debt, that they cannot be the excuse for the current problem. So how come government rejects this finance claim, and yet you say it's apparent on the face of the issues they have stated?
How come we didn't have enough crude oil? Did you not just state that they said it was expensive?
LCO is expensive.
Precisely.
And to add to our debt.
Precisely. So
we didn't buy.
Yeah, we didn't buy. Why didn't you buy? You didn't have the money.
Do we buy on standby, or we make the orders immediately we realize there's a problem?
No, we are supposed to have enough crude oil in stock at all times.
I see.
Because you are basically operating dual fuel plants.
Okay.
Gas can trip, anything can happen to gas. You see, they've been able to pay some of the debts because EXLA is in place.
Yeah. Say they brought it from 2.8 to 2.3. Almost 500 million US dollars.
How much was EXLA supposed to have earned over the period? And how has EXLA been used? Look, there is a report on EXLA that was submitted to Parliament. Part of EXLA was used to pay pensions.
Pension?
Yes.
But that's not energy sector related levy.
Precisely. Check on the report on EXLA, the use of EXLA.
Yeah.
So we still have...
I saying that they could have cleared the debt, the 2.4...
No, you see, we envisage that the legacy debt, that is, if we were not adding to it, the legacy debt could have been cleared in 5 years.
I see.
Yeah, that was why...
From 2015.
Yeah, that was why EXLA was for 5 years.
Yeah.
Within the 5 years, the legacy debt could have been cleared. That is, if we were not adding to it. The government found it useful to extend EXLA for whatever reasons. They have the mandate of the people, so they say, fine, instead of 5 years, we're extending EXLA. So they issue some bonds on the back of EXLA, 10-year bonds.
Yeah.
Which means the tax is not going to be retired in 5 years. It will go beyond the 5 years. That's fine. So we still have a basic finance problem in the sector. You see, let's move away from this NDC, MPP thing. It's unhelpful. And it's been one of the challenges we've had in this country, especially in the power sector. You see, when the fundamentals are wrong, to borrow from our vice president, you'll be exposed.
Okay.
Look, if you take the last tariff adjustment,
yeah,
the last tariff adjustment did not help the energy sector.
It was 17.5 for residential. The businesses were getting almost 30%.
Yeah, it was good for the populace because it was short term. The government got applause for it, but it was very, very, very unhelpful to the power sector institutions.
But they didn't complain.
They did.
The ECG did not, when we asked them, say, oh, well, they implemented nicely.
If your employer,
okay,
your shareholder,
I see,
takes a decision,
you can't contradict that, really.
You'll be very stupid to come out to contradict it. Look, let me give you the effect of, part of the effect of the decision. In 2016, ECG made profits. 2017, they made losses. 2018, they made losses.
And you say this is just because we reduced the tariffs?
No, it's one of the contributory factors.
Oh, one of them?
Yes. I mean, when you are dealing with an entity, there's usually not just one cause, but that contributing cause could be major. Gridco, the most sensitive of all the power sector institutions, in my opinion. Gridco is the most critical. Gridco had to forego 80% of their planned capital expenditure this year because of the tariff reduction.
And they told you that?
Yes. I mean, they presented their budget to the Committee of Mines and Energy and why they had to shelve some part of their capital expenditure. If you don't have the revenue flow you had projected. And you see, let's look at things this way. 70 to 80% of the expenditure of power sector institutions, apart from salary and wages, is dollar denominated. You have the CD deteriorating against the dollar. So even without touching the tariff,
their money will go down.
Your money is already going down. And then when you go further to reduce the tariff by an average of 20% or more, that's a double whammy. Okay. However, the Ghanaian states could have still taken a political decision that, look, we are reducing the tariff, the people are suffering, fine. But we are also the sole shareholder of the power sector institutions. What do? You inject capital, equity.
I see.
Yeah, to compensate for the lack of the reduced revenue flow. Look, there is always the talk about losses in the Ghanaian power sector. We have two types of losses, commercial and technical. The only solution to technical losses is investment. If you are transmitting on a 33 kV line and you upgrade that to 66 or 161, your losses reduce. If you are transmitting on 161 and you upgrade to 330, your losses reduce. If you are using old and outmoded transformers and you replace them with state-of-the-art transformers, your technical losses reduce.
Okay.
So to reduce technical losses, you need to invest more. So if we are not investing, and the state is the sole shareholder, for example, Gridco is a company by its own 100% by the Ghanaian state. So if we are reducing their tariffs, then we also have an obligation to inject equity.
I see.
That we didn't do.
Okay.
And the effect is not just short term, it's long term. If you postpone critical maintenance or critical investment, you are postponing the inevitable. It will catch up with you.
What you're saying is that when we reduced tariffs, when we said the tariffs were high, they were cutthroat, and the government was going to make the ordinary people feel the effect of that. This was a campaign promise. Yes. Government proceeded to reduce the tariffs, 70.5% for residents, 30% for businesses. You're saying that this is a contributory factor to why we had the difficulties with the finance, and that the groups like ACG, Gridco will struggle.
And VRA, they all struggle.
They all struggle.
Yeah, because your revenue has reduced, your gross revenue has reduced, and you're also being hit by depreciation. You see, your payables are denominated in US dollar. Your receivables are in Ghanaian cedis. So that alone
would actually reduce the amount of money you have.
Precisely, in real terms. You see, I am for efficiency gains. If we had matched the
reduction in tariffs
with efficiency gains,
as an investment into, or giving the money to do the things they ought to do.
Yeah, you see, when you invest more, you become more efficient.
Efficient, yeah.
At least the technical side of the losses. The commercial side of the losses, with technology, we can also fix it. But do you have the money to invest? So you either invest from your revenue as an operating entity or from shareholder equity contributions.
So do you have an idea how much these companies have lost over the period since we introduced the revised downward tariffs?
No, I wouldn't want to state a figure, but research you can find out how much they were supposed to have earned in 2018 and how much has actually been. A lot of them had to revise their budgets to take cognizance of lower revenue flows.
But you know the government stated that it was not touching the tariffs of the people. What was really doing was to make sure that the old structures, for example, if it checked oil, not gas, for example, was supposed to be purchased along the line. If you're not buying as much gas and the government has renegotiated the cost of the gas, why would you still be charging old prices for it? And Ghanaians would not benefit from that. Government was clear in its mind that these companies were not going to in any way be affected by the tariff review because it was purely technical. It was purely a smart move to make sure the Ghanaians feel the impact of all of these.
See, there are two things involved here. Remember, the energy sector agencies are sent proposals for upwards review to PURC.
Did they?
They did.
Okay.
They did. They sent proposals, and these proposals were in the public domain.
Okay.
So the best the state could have done, in my opinion, was to maintain existing prices without giving them the upwards review. Let me also credit the government with something. The cost of local gas was reduced because the government reduced some of the taxes on local gas.
Yes.
I want to credit the government with
but that's also the basis for the reduction anyway.
That alone couldn't have been enough. The deterioration of the CD against the dollar, major in the power sector. There's major impact. So, and then, of course, look, there are annual salary increases. There are investments, critical investments needed. And that is why I posit that, look, the Ghanaian state could have injected more equity into the companies because we own them. You need to do critical investments. Your revenue has reduced. Your projected revenue is no longer what you're getting. But there is an overriding socio-political reason to reduce your tariff. Okay. We compensate that by equity injection. So that was not done.
Currently, and I'm sticking out this one because it's essential now. How do we resolve this singular problem of the impact of the tariffs on the generators, the distributors, and the usage in this case?
You see, as a nation, we are wasteful when it comes to power.
Okay.
We are very inefficient. From our very homes, the average Ghanaian can, with a few efficiency measures, reduce consumption by about 20 to 30%. Energy Commission did some work on that. And if we were to reduce consumption by 20%, it means if the tariff were to go up even by 20%, you still pay the same amount.
Okay.
Yeah. So at the personal level, we are inefficient. At the corporate level, we are also inefficient because historically, power has been relatively very cheap, especially when we were totally dependent on hydro, Akosombo. But with the thermal plants, the game has changed. Today, on a given day, if we don't have a 50-50, we have more thermal than Akosombo. Okay. So the generation box is shifting. Has our consumption pattern shifted?
I see we should consume less
per capita. Yes, per capita we should be consuming more power. We should become more efficient, except for industry.
Yeah, that's a question I was about asking.
Except for industry. If we are growing, and there is discernible growth in industry, currently, most of the growth Ghanaian economy has experienced is oil-driven.
That's true.
So industry is not really growing.
Not that much.
Not that much.
I'm getting your point. I'm getting to understand why we are where we are today and what in your case ought to be done. But government cannot ultimately rely on people's goodwill to reduce their consumption. Especially when you reduce tariff, you expect more consumption ordinarily because people will be more fearless in their consumption because they know they can pay.
No, there are policies. For example, let me give you one example. One result of the tariff reduction. Energy Commission was supposed to put in place a number of rooftop solar units on public buildings, schools, hospitals, etc. They had to abandon that because of absence of revenue.
Okay.
Yeah. And those are some of the measures we need to take as a people. For example, all schools, all public buildings, ministries, name them, should have solar. That will reduce the dependence on grid power. Mm-hmm. In my house in Yeji, I go sometimes a whole week without using grid power because I have solar.
Okay.
Those are some of the measures we should be taking. If we look at our factories, especially our SMEs, power factor correction, if those things were done, it will also reduce their consumption. Energy Commission has done a number of studies and pilots. This is no rocket science. Energy Commission. We have the capacity. We have what it takes. But our problem as a nation, I sum our problem as two. Absence of nationalism and discipline. If we were to fix these two things, a lot of our challenges arises out of indiscipline.
Okay.
Whether it's fiscal, whether it's political, whatever, it's indiscipline. We do the things we are not supposed to do. And yet we are not prepared to pay economic. But the state also has an obligation. Sometimes people don't really know how to reduce consumption.
Yeah.
So the state has an obligation, the state and its agencies have an obligation to educate. In the average Ghanaian home, somebody will plug an iron just to iron a handkerchief or one piece of cloth.
I get your point. Now, the other point I wanted to know from you in this case, and I'm trying to put them together because it makes a lot of sense to me. The understanding we have of our current situation is that, we are out of the woods completely. So the minister tells us that hydro generation will put a full blast all the, what they call it, turbines at Akosombo. We are also told that as of Monday, when the minister was speaking, Nigerian gas was supposed to flow that day. In the course of the next few days, from Monday to the rest of this week, we should expect that it will move up to the pressure that we want from Nigeria. All of this means that scheduled capacity at peak is 2,498 watts at the time, with a projected peak demand of 2,430. We virtually, according to the ministry, have resolved the problem and are back on our feet.
You see, as a people, we cannot expect different outcomes doing the same thing over and over again, unfortunately. I am on record to have said that Nigerian gas is reliably unreliable.
Okay.
Because finance is one. It's only one leg of the Nigerian gas problem. When you get to Nigeria, plants in the western corridor of Nigeria use a lot of heavy fuel oil or crude because even for plants in Nigeria, gas supply is unreliable. Pipelines are perforated, they are sabotaged, there's problem at, they have infrastructural problems, challenge here and there, and we have lived through this over a number of years. So the absence of gas or short supply of gas from Nigeria should no longer be
an excuse.
Remember my
mentally retarding
argument or position.
I'm sure that is why you were made Prime Minister. But the people said that you were sitting on the bench and criticized the system.
Yes. So we have historically realized that gas from Nigeria is unreliable at the best of times. Sometimes not because they don't want to give us, or sometimes not because we owe, but they don't have. The pipeline has been compromised, so gas is not coming.
I see.
And
there's a finance part too that has always been a problem.
It's a problem. And then, of course, we took, having looked at the situation, must we become dependent on Nigerian gas? We said no. So let's diversify our fuel sources. So we brought in heavy fuel oil. We can use light crude. Then we can ramp up our hydro. Now, fortunately, we have domestic gas.
I see.
And these are supposed to provide, the combination is supposed to provide fuel security. So if we don't have fuel security and we come out to say there's a problem with Nigerian gas, do we have enough reserves of crude to fire the plants? We don't.
You don't.
So when the minister says crude is expensive, it is indirectly saying, look, there's a financial problem there.
And this financial problem, they put the burden of the former government on the tables. Look, they believe that it's surely purely the actions of the previous government. They are clearing your mess.
It is most unfair. It is most unfair because when we came in 2009, fortunately I was deputy minister.
Okay.
We inherited debts. There have always been debts in the power sector. For example, even the billing. You are not consumed immediately you build. There is a time lapse. You are billed and then you have another time to pay. So just that alone can take 2 months. So when you miss one payment, these are things. And remember, Ghana PLC is a continuum. Things don't stop because one regime has ended this term and another regime is starting. You pass on assets and liabilities. And it's not like the past government didn't do anything about the debt situation. And that was why, as unpopular as it was, especially close to an election year, we still passed ESLA. It's a recognition of an actuality in our supply chain, that finance plays a key role.
If we are strictly applying ESLA, should we have this financial challenge?
We could apply ESLA and still have financial challenge if the current pricing is not right.
I see. You're talking about the current changes that we made.
Yeah, the tariff. If the tariff is not right, you could still have money to pay legacy debts.
Yeah.
But you'll be accumulating new debt.
More debt in this particular case.
Yeah.
Do you also believe that it's because ECG cannot pay the generator, that's why we're where we are?
It's part of the reason.
It's part of the reason.
Yeah, a large chunk. But it's not just only ECG. VRA has been unable to pay Ghana Gas Company Limited.
That's also another problem.
That's another problem.
And this is not because ECG is not paying them.
ECG is not paying them, and they have not also been able to collect all their payables from. There are entities that VRA supplies direct. All their power does not go to ECG.
Okay. There's the argument, strict argument, very, very strict, that says that if you create a problem by reducing tariffs, be realistic. Just make sure that you take out these reductions so that at least we can be assured of power in the future. I'm sure many Ghanaians prefer constant and consistent flow of power to intermittent, or whichever word you want to put there in this particular case, to intermittent ones, which makes everybody uncomfortable.
I would ordinarily have said yes, but unfortunately I would say no.
Why?
Why? Because in 2015, Ghanaians were crying, saying, look, even if we had the power and we will pay higher, we are ready.
Yes.
When we cleared load shedding and there was a rise in tariffs, it was one of the election issues. That we couldn't pay power bills. Power bills had gone up, etc., etc., etc.
But we've had the experience of seeing that when you reduce it, we don't get the power. Then there are so many things being told us, but we don't get the power finally.
You see, it's like in the desert. When you're in the desert, you are thirsty and you want to die out of thirst. You will promise to buy this glass of water for $100 if it's available.
I see.
But once you are out of the desert, you will say, what?
I get that, but see, is it the fault of the Ghanaian? Is the government caught in a very hard place now? It doesn't know whether how to go back to the old tariffs or even increase tariffs as we speak today. And on the other side, it doesn't also know whether there's a solution inside. Or
you see, if you ask, is it the fault of the Ghanaian? I want to disabuse our minds of this dichotomy between government and Ghanaian.
Okay.
governments reflect the mentality, the thinking, and the values of the people of Ghana.
But the Ghanaians did not say that the government should promise you that we will reduce tariffs. So when you come and insist that you live according to your word, I believe is that you have secured all of the other things.
Look, and again, those promises were in the manifesto.
Yes, Doc. The manifesto. The
manifesto. They were in the manifesto.
The manifesto said that they're going to build back up. Yes. Reserve margin.
Yes.
Reserve margin, that means that if some of these problems happen, we will fall back on that. So we're not expecting that when you reduce what they call the tariffs, on the other hand, you come and tell us that you don't have money.
You see, you can't eat your cake and have it.
But that was never the argument posted to us. So we're never told that doing this will make me eat my cake and not have it.
Are we not intelligent?
No.
Can't we ask? Look, I have a problem. I hold public office.
Yes.
I hold public office. I'm a politician. And I always have a challenge, even with public policy in this country.
Okay.
We hardly demand costing. We make all sorts of promises.
So when they told us that we reduce tariff, we should have asked them that how much will it cost us?
How much will it cost us? What is the effect?
But
take free SHS.
Yes.
We were happy. And sincerely, every Ghanaian thinks ideally it should be free. But do we ever think of the cost? What are the cost implications of our decisions? We are comfortable running with the slogans and then the promises. But as a people, we fail historically to look at the cost. And therefore, when it hits us in the face, we say, but this was not what we were promised.
Of course, you represent the politicians, but I would want to represent the people in this case. Yes. I think it's unfair to them that they don't have the capacity to do their own calculations on the cost. You can't treat them with a promise. Then later on you say that, oh, well, because of the promise, this is the downside to it.
I refuse to accept that Ghanaians don't have the capacity to do the cost. They do.
So you are convinced?
As a people, we are just intellectually lazy. Look at our think tanks. Assuming as individuals, we may not have the technical skills to do our think tanks. Do they raise issues of cost?
So, Doc, how do we fix the problem? You say we should not go back to the old tariffs, which will guarantee us constant supply of power. That's what you are saying today.
I am saying that we have choices to make. First of all, if we want reduced tariffs, that the reduction should at least be equal to efficiency gains.
As we should do investments into this.
Precisely. Yes. At the minimum, if we are reducing tariffs by 5%, we must also generate at least 5% efficiency gains.
This government doesn't have money. It has complained about resources from God knows how long. In fact,
no state ever has money to do all the things, but states has banned resources effectively, efficiently, and move away from populism.
Okay, now I get your point. Now we are where we are today.
Yes.
Are you convinced by what the energy minister is saying that the problem has been resolved?
You see, in 2014, 2015, we had two challenges. One, we did not have adequate generating capacity, and then we had fuel challenges. Today, we have adequate generating capacity to the extent that the government is even accusing us of
costing some 20 million per month.
Yeah, but again, that is really, really most unfair. As we sit...
No, sorry, is it true that the PPAs are costing the people of this republic 20 million every single month?
Which PPAs? The operating PPAs?
Yes.
Assuming, you see, again, let me disabuse the minds of listeners on this. In power, you will always have to have a reserve margin.
Yeah.
Apart from the reserve margin is to take care of an occasional generating unit going down. So you kick in the reserve margin. But apart from the reserve margin, for a developing country, you also have to have some power beyond the reserve margin available. Our president goes globetrotting, and all our presidents have done that, touting for investments. Investors are coming in.
They'll set up plans.
They'll set up plans. Are you going to tell that, and it takes an average of 3 years for a power plant from breaking ground and, from conception to generation, an average of 3 years. Are you going to tell the investor that okay, come in, wait 3 years, I will generate enough power for you to come and set up your factory. Okay. No investor will do that.
So what you're saying is
so you must always have some excess up beyond the reserve margin.
But when you do
but who should pay for it?
But when you do the cost-benefit analysis, is it more beneficial to the ordinary people in this country that we have these reserve margins and all of that available, and yet we are paying for it, and on the other side, waiting for investors that we are yet to see in this country?
I'm not. When I talk of investors, I'm not only talking about foreign
I get your point. I get you. I mean, Ghanaians will even set up companies.
Precisely.
We are trying one district, one factory.
Yes.
But I'm asking,
the power must be there to set up the factory.
Who wins in the cost-benefit analysis?
The people of Ghana win. If there is investment, if factories are set up either by Ghanaians or foreigners, there's an expansion in the domestic economy. Jobs are created. Ghanaians are employed. State revenue increases because of taxes and corporate tax, income tax, etc. You see, there is no free lunch anywhere in the world.
I get your point.
We must pay for it. And let me even,
but you are not disputing the 20 million, right? You're not disputing it.
Look, I don't have the current figure.
Okay. Every single month, that's what you're saying.
I don't even, and again, I have an issue. Valco is sitting idle. 3 port lines are idle for lack of power. Each port line takes 75 megawatts. If we are paying 20 million in capacity charges for idle power, and Valco says, look, we can only pay 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. If you're already paying this free, why don't we give the excess power to Valco to power the 3 port lines, create jobs, especially downstream of Valco?
But I know that aluminium smelter has not really given us any, what do you call it, productive engagement for a very long time. We have struggled with government owning it, letting some other people own it and all of that.
With Aluwex and all the others, they take their raw materials from Valco.
Okay.
So if we expand all the roofing sheet companies, the cooking utensils, so if some of them are importing raw materials because Valco is unable to supply, the canning industry, we can't have a competitive canning industry because of raw materials. So if we give even the surplus power to Valco free, the downstream effect of job creation, Valco will increase its employment. Okay. And for any Ghanaian, single Ghanaian doing a full-time job, there are 4 dependents on that Ghanaian.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Doc, the question I'm asking you now is pretty simple. Do you think that we are completely out of the woods?
Again, you see, it's neither black and white. We have enough generating capacity to the extent that the government even says we have excess. That leg of the problem is solved.
Yeah.
The next problem is fuel. Today we may have enough fuel. Can the government guarantee or anybody guarantee that in the next 3 months we'll always have the same amount, the same level of fuel? Nobody can really. So sometimes when governments make promises, when in 2015, 16 December, when I announced the end of load shedding, had announced the end of load shedding because we then had enough generating capacity and we had enough fuel at the time to
run these plants.
And therefore, load shedding arising out of generational deficit had ended. But hey, from that point going forward, you will still buy fuel. You can buy a car. Now my transportation needs have been solved because I now have a car. My brother, you still have to buy fuel. And if you don't buy fuel, the car will be there and you still have a transportation.
It all comes back to the cash.
Yes, it comes back to cash.
Now, there's the other part that I wanted a direct solution to, and I'm running out of time, so I'm actually hitting just a few points in this case. The finance part to do with we increasing tariffs and yet reducing tariffs and yet don't have money to fill in. How do we deal with that problem now?
We must boldly decide as a people, and again, not NDC, MPP, as a people, decide what we want. For example...
No, I'm asking you to tell us how we should deal with the problem. I know the decision may be government's own, or even we, the people of this republic, but also Ghanaian too.
Yes.
If you were Power Minister today, what would you have done?
I will make the case for at least retaining the tariffs and then looking for money, whether we have to go on the international market to look for Ghana, to invest in critical expansion and critical upgrades so as to generate efficiencies, and then we can pass on the efficiencies to the people.
The easiest option would have been reversing these reductions.
I believe.
I mean, this is not with the political hat on.
The economics don't add up. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
The economics don't add up.
That's when you reduce it.
Yeah, that when you reduce without injecting capital for critical investments, it will catch up with you.
That's still going to be problematic.
It's going to be problematic. Unless, of course, you see, with our increased oil revenue, for example, in 2016, our total oil earning was about 172 million. Last year, or this year, as of September, we had earned over 700 million.
Okay.
If we decide to appropriate a part of that into investment, that is fine. But it will also be at the cost of something. It may be at the cost of agriculture or at the cost of... But as a people, we need to be more efficient in all our ways, whether it's in energy or...
I'm actually a direct question because you've been in the office before.
Yes, I've been.
By his engagements and the current handling of the situation, is the current energy minister able to manage the affairs of the ministry?
One of the things I've never done and which I will never do is to mark a colleague minister. The people of Ghana are in a better position than I am.
Okay. How is the sector faring? Is the sector on the right path or the wrong path? The energy sector.
The energy sector has a lot of potential, especially the oil and gas sector. But the power sector is presently challenged. We have to have an energy dialogue, putting partisanship aside, and design the energy sector we want for this country going forward.
What should we do with Ameri currently?
Well, currently Ameri is producing, except for lack of gas. In less than 2 years, Ameri will become ours for free. Currently, Ameri has the lowest levelized tariff of all the IPPs. What else?
Dr. Kamna, I appreciate the time. We should do this more often. Well, folks, that's where we end today's edition of UPfront. My name is Raymond Alkwa.